It's raining again today. For the third day in a row, the sky over Upland is overcast with gray clouds, and small drops drum on the roof of my house. I'm 67, and the weather is affecting my mood more and more. It's not just the weather, though. I'm sitting in my office going through the papers of former clients. Although I officially retired 3 years ago, some still come to me for tax advice. 35 years as a tax advisor taught me one simple truth. People are most afraid of losing their money, and that's true not just when it comes to taxes. My name is Willow Harlow. After my husband died 12 years ago, I live alone in a 2-story house on the outskirts of town. Despite realtors' offers to sell the too big for a single woman house, I refuse. This house is my space, my fortress. Plus, I like to keep all 5 rooms in order. It takes time, and time is the one thing I have in abundance. Unlike my son's attention, Leighton, my only child, now 38 years old, tall, with dark hair like his father's and my gray eyes. An outwardly attractive man who knows how to make an impression when you first meet him. But that impression is deceptive, as I've learned over the years. I put the kettle on and stare out the window at the empty driveway. Leighton hasn't been to see me in 3 months. Although calling asking for money is welcome, we know how to do that. The last time he called was 2 weeks ago. He had an urgent need to pay a down payment on a new car. I wired the money without question. As usual, why? Because it's the only way I can keep in touch with my son. Money became our means of communication after he graduated from college and moved into his apartment across town. I still remember the day Leighton first asked me for a large sum of money. He was 23, had just gotten a job as a real estate appraiser, and wanted to impress his coworkers. "Mom, I need a decent suit and a watch. In our business, looks solve everything," he said, sitting at this very kitchen table. I agreed, of course. What could be more natural than helping my son launch his career? That was followed by helping with a down payment on a car, then an apartment, then a vacation with some girl whose name I couldn't even remember, and then another, and another, and another. It's become a system. Leighton calls, explains why he needs the money urgently. I transfer it to his account. In exchange, I get a brief thank you and a promise to come back at the weekend, which is rarely fulfilled. The kettle boils, distracting me from my unhappy thoughts. I pour boiling water into a cup and drop in a tea bag. My late husband Erwin always laughed at my tea bag habit. "Real tea is made in a teapot, Willow," he used to say. I smile at that memory. What would Erwin say if he saw the way his son treats me now? Erwin died of a heart attack when Leighton was 26. Up until then, our son had been on his best behavior, calling regularly, coming over for Sunday dinners. After the funeral, something changed. It was like the deterrent was gone. Leighton became distant, his visits less and less frequent, but the requests for financial assistance became more frequent. I opened my laptop to check my email. There's nothing of interest in my inbox: store mailings, a utility bill notice, an invitation to a college reunion I'm going to ignore. I'm about to close the browser when I notice a notification from Facebook. Laura Ackles added a new photo. Laura is Leighton's current girlfriend. I've seen her twice in glimpses. A petite woman with blonde hair and a pointy chin. Works as a pharmacist at a drugstore. They've been dating for 1.5 years, but my son has never officially brought her home. "Things just don't work out, Mom," is his standard response to my questions. Out of curiosity, I open the notice. The photo shows Laura with a radiant smile, showing her left hand with a ring on her ring finger. The caption under the photo reads, "Happiest day ever. He proposed. Wedding in 2 months." I feel the cup shake in my hand. I set it on the table before I spill my tea. Leighton proposed. The wedding is in 2 months. And I find out about it from a random social media post. The comments under the photo are full of congratulations. Among them, I see Leighton's reply, "Thank you all. We are very happy. Planning a small but beautiful ceremony. Only the closest people, just the closest people. And Mother is obviously not one of them." I close my laptop, and for a few minutes I just sit staring out the window. The rain is getting heavier. I'm not in pain, no, it's more like empty, like a cavity has formed inside with nothing to fill it. The solution comes quickly. I pick up the phone and dial my son's number. He answers after the 5th ring. "Hi, Mom." I hear the wariness in his voice. He always answers like that. expecting me to discover another one of his lies. Hello, Leighton. My voice sounds as calm as ever. I just saw Laura's Facebook post. Congratulations on your engagement. A pause. I can almost see him frantically thinking of what to say. Thank you, he finally replies. I was going to call you tonight and tell you. A lie. Another lie. When's the wedding? I ask. 2 months from now. June 15th. That's pretty soon. Have you already started the preparations? There's another pause. I hear a noise in the background. I think he's at work. Yeah, we're looking for a place for the ceremony and a restaurant for the banquet. Everything's so expensive, it's a nightmare. Here it is, bringing the conversation to money. It always does. I can imagine, I said. Weddings aren't cheap these days. Yeah, Mom, you have no idea. Leighton's getting excited. We went to 3 restaurants yesterday, and it was at least $300 a person. And then there are the flowers, the dress, the photographer. I listen silently as he lists the expenses. The numbers grow with each sentence. Finally, he pauses. How much do you need? I ask him bluntly. What? His voice sounds like I've done something to offend him. Mom, I didn't ask. Leighton, let's not do this. How much do you need for the wedding? He stops talking again, then sighs. We're about $20,000 short of what we want. $20,000. It's a lot of money, but it's not critical to me. I got the life insurance after Erwin died. Plus, I've invested my savings wisely over the years. I can afford to help my son with his wedding. Okay, I say. I'll wire the money to your account. You will? There's genuine surprise in his voice. Apparently, the amount seemed too much even for me. Thanks, Mom. You don't know how important this is for us. I do, I said. By the way, when will you send me an invitation? I need to know in advance to prepare. Silence again. Longer than before. About that, Mom. His voice is getting quieter. Laura and I have decided to have a very small ceremony, just our closest friends and, her parents. I'm clutching the phone tighter. And me? You see, Laura is very nervous about the wedding, and we want to avoid any unnecessary stress, he says quickly, clearly having prepared this answer in advance. Her parents are very conservative, and she's worried that you, with your progressive views, might embarrass them. My progressive views? What is he talking about? Leighton, I don't understand. What are my progressive views? Well, you've always been so independent with a career, your own business. Her mom never worked. She was a homemaker. They might misunderstand you. I close my eyes. It's clear now. It's not about my views. It's just that I don't fit the picture of the perfect family he wants to present to the bride's parents. And you're offering me $20,000 for a wedding I'm not even invited to? Mom, please don't start. He sounded annoyed. I explained the situation. It's not my decision, it's Laura's. How convenient to blame everything on the bride. Typical Leighton. Okay, I understand, I say, even though I don't really understand. I'll wire the money today. Thanks, Mom. The relief in his voice is almost palpable. I'll stop by the other day and we'll talk. I promise. Another promise he won't keep. Of course, I said. Goodbye, Leighton. I hang up the phone and stare out the window for a long time. The rain has finally stopped, but the sky is still cloudy. A strange calmness comes over me. I now know where I stand in my son's life. Just an ATM machine. Not a mother, not a family, not a loved one. A source of funding. I open the banking app on my phone and transfer $20,000 into Leighton's account. Then I call my old friend Rowena. Hi, Will, she answers in her husky voice. How's it going? Leighton's getting married, I say without preamble. Oh, Rowena pauses. And how are you? He asked for $20,000 for the wedding and said I wouldn't be invited. What? The indignation in her voice is so sincere that I smile involuntarily. Is he crazy? And you said yes? I transferred the money. Willow! Rowena is almost screaming. Why? Why do you continue to indulge this? This? Because he's my son, I answer calmly. The only one I have. Rowena sighs heavily. You're too kind to him. You always have been. And he takes advantage of it. She's right, of course, but to admit it out loud is to admit that I've been living in an illusion for the last 15 years. that all my efforts to stay in touch with my son have been in vain. Are you free tomorrow night? I ask, changing the subject. We can have dinner at the Olive Grove. Of course, Rowena immediately agrees. At 7? 7, I confirm and hang up. I open Facebook again and find Laura's page. Her profile isn't locked, so I can see all the pictures. I look through the latest posts. Lots of selfies, pictures of eating at restaurants, some meetings with girlfriends, and a few pictures with Leighton. They're on a picnic, at a movie, on the beach. In all the photos, they are smiling, looking happy. I wonder if Laura knows that her future husband is financially dependent on his mother, that his job as a real estate appraiser doesn't bring in enough money for the lifestyle he's used to, that his new car, suits, watches, vacations are all paid for by his old mother, that he's ashamed to show his fiancée? Not likely. More likely, Leighton envisioned himself as a successful, independent man. That's the image he's always tried to maintain in front of others. I close the browser and go into the kitchen to make dinner. For one person, as usual. I chop vegetables for the salad, put a pot of water on the stove for the pasta. Mechanical actions help distract me from unpleasant thoughts. The phone rings. I wipe my hands with a towel and pick it up, expecting to hear Leighton's voice thanking me for the translation. But it's not him. Mrs. Harlow? A woman's voice, unfamiliar. It's Laura Eccles, Leighton's fiancée. What a surprise. Hello, Laura, I answer, trying to sound neutral. I'm calling to thank you for your generous gift, she says. Leighton just told me that you're paying for most of our wedding, so my son decided to present my money as a gift. Interesting. You're welcome, Laura, I say. I'm happy to help. Leighton says you can't make it to the ceremony? I hear a question in her voice. I hesitate to answer. What exactly did her son tell her? I realized I wasn't going to get an invitation, I answer cautiously. Oh, Laura sounds confused. Leighton said you're very busy with your work and counseling clients, so you won't be able to attend. That's how it is. I'm a workaholic who has no time to attend his own son's wedding, another one of Leighton's lies. Laura, I've been retired for 3 years, I say. I have plenty of free time. You do? She's clearly embarrassed. But Leighton said, what exactly did Leighton say? I can't help my curiosity. That you've always been more focused on your career than your family, she stammers. I'm sorry, that sounded rude. I didn't mean to. That's okay, I interrupt. That's an interesting interpretation. An awkward silence hangs on the line. Then Laura clears her throat. Anyway, thank you so much for your help with the payment. It really means a lot to us. You're welcome, I say again. I hope you have a beautiful wedding. Thank you, she hesitates again. Well, goodbye, Mrs. Harlow. Goodbye, Laura. I hang up the phone and go back to cooking dinner. The water for the pasta is already boiling. I pour the pasta into the pot and stir it with a fork. The picture is clearer now. Leighton's not only lying to me, he's lying to his fiancée. He's portraying me as a busy, career-focused mom who doesn't care about her family, and at the same time, he's taking money from me for the wedding. The next day, the weather finally improved. The sun broke through the clouds and the birds sang in the yard. I woke up early, as usual. Old habits wouldn't let go. 35 years of getting up at 6 in the morning for work had left an indelible mark. Retirement hasn't changed that. After a light breakfast, I cleaned myself up and went about my daily routine. Routines help structure time when there is too much of it. At 11:30, the phone rang. Hi, Mom. Leighton's voice sounded unusually cheerful. How are you? Hello? I answered. I'm fine, thanks. Did you get my message thanking you for the transfer? No, I checked my phone. Nothing came. Strange. He didn't even try to sound sincere. Well, anyway, thank you so much. You've been a great help to Laura and me. You're welcome, I said quietly. By the way, Laura called me yesterday. A pause. I could almost hear Leighton tense up. Did she? His voice became wary. And what did you two talk about? She was thanking me for the wedding gift. I emphasized the word gift. And regretted that I wouldn't be able to attend because of my busy work schedule. Another pause, a longer one. Oh, yes, he said at last. I explained to her that you were very busy with your clients. Interesting, considering I'm retired. Well, you're still counseling some people, he tried to joke. Listen, I thought I'd stop by your place today. I need to go over some more wedding details. Translation: he needs more money. Okay, I agreed. What time should I expect you? 2 hours. I'm at work right now, but I'll be off early. I'll be waiting. I hung up the phone and looked out the window. The sun was shining on my well-tended garden, which I'd been working on for the past 5 years. What I'm really doing in retirement is gardening. Unlike people, plants respond with care to care. Exactly 2 hours and 15 minutes later, Leighton's silver Audi showed up in the driveway, the car I had given him the money for the down payment on 3 years ago. My son is always late, but never more than 20 minutes late. It's a trait of his that I've long ago accepted. He entered without knocking, using his key. Tall, well-dressed, with a fashionable 3-day stubble and carefully styled hair. He looks like a successful, confident man. Only I know how much it costs to maintain that image. Hi, Mom. He kissed me on the cheek. He smelled like expensive perfume. You look good. The standard compliment he said every time I met him, no matter how I actually looked. Thank you, I smiled. Would you like some coffee? I'd love some. We walked to the kitchen. Leighton sat at the table while I made coffee. He looked around the room with the slight disdain that always slipped into his gaze when he visited my house. Like everything here was too old-fashioned, not stylish enough for him. How was work? I asked, setting my cup down in front of him. It was okay, he shrugged. Nothing special, same houses, same clients. But I'm thinking about a promotion. Talked to the boss last week. I nodded, pretending to believe him. Leighton had been thinking about a promotion regularly for the last 10 years, but somehow it never came. How's Laura? Getting ready to get married? Oh, yeah, he perked up. It's all she talks about. The dress, the flowers, the photographer, the restaurant. There's so much to organize. I can imagine, I sat down across from him. Weddings are a whole industry now. Exactly. Leighton sipped his coffee. And it's all so expensive. Everyone's trying to charge you triple the price as soon as they hear the word wedding. I waited silently for him to get to the point. Didn't take long. By the way, that's what I wanted to talk about. He set the cup on the table. Laura and I worked out a more detailed budget for the wedding, and it turned out that $20,000 might not be enough. Oh, I tried to keep my voice neutral. Yeah, Leighton pulled a folded piece of paper out of his pocket and unfolded it on the table. Here, look. The rent for the ceremony is $3,000. Restaurant for 50 guests, $15,000. Photographer and videographer, $4,000. Laura's dress, $3,000. Flowers and decorations, another $2,000. My suit, rings, musicians. He continued to list the expenses and I looked at the numbers. The sum really turned out to be much more than $20,000. How much are you short? I asked him when he was finished. $15,000 more. Leighton looked at me hopefully. Mom, I know it's a lot, but it's a once-in-a-lifetime thing, right? Laura and I want everything to be perfect. $15,000, plus the $20,000 I already transferred. $35,000 for a wedding I wasn't even invited to. Leighton, I looked him in the eye. Why am I not invited to your wedding? He looked away. Mom, we already talked about this. Laura is very nervous about her parents. They're conservative, religious people. You're different. What do you mean different? I kept looking at him. Well, He hesitated. You've always been so independent with your own opinions. Her parents believe that a woman should be a mother and a wife first and foremost, not a businesswoman. Is that why I can't attend my own son's wedding? It's not just that, Leighton sighed. Laura says she doesn't want to mix our families, that it would only create unnecessary tension. Besides, you don't really like these events, do you? The crowds, the noise, the commotion. I kept silent as I watched him try to justify himself. My son was never a convincing liar, at least not to me. And you agree with Laura? I finally asked. Yeah. He looked away again. Mom, you have to understand I'm between two fires. I want everyone to be happy. Everyone except your mother, I said, not as a rebuke, but as a statement of fact. Mom, don't start, please, Leighton grumbled. I know it's not an ideal situation, but what can I do? I love Laura. I want to marry her, and she's really nervous about this wedding. I sighed. Years had taught me that arguing with Leighton was useless. He'd always find an excuse, always twist the situation so that he came out of it, a victim of circumstance instead of a person making a conscious choice. Okay. I stood up and walked over to the kitchen cabinet. I'll wire you another 15,000. You will? His face lit up. Thanks, Mom. You're the best. I pulled out the checkbook I hardly ever used in the age of online banking, but kept for special occasions. I wrote a check for $15,000 and handed it to Leighton. Here, I said. I hope it helps make your wedding perfect. You have no idea. He took the check and folded it neatly, tucking it into his pocket. Laura and I would be so grateful. I'm sure you will, I smiled. By the way, where will the ceremony be held? Minus St. Thomas Chapel, Leighton answered. June 15th, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. He said it automatically without thinking that he was giving me information that would allow me to show up at the wedding uninvited. Typical of a man who thinks only of himself. Sounds beautiful, I said. As I recall, it's that little chapel on the hill? Yes, that's right. He nodded. It's a very picturesque place, and everything inside is very atmospheric. I'm glad you found the right place, I said sincerely. The chapel was really beautiful. Leighton finished his coffee and stood up. I gotta go, Mom. I have to stop by the florist and talk about the decorations. Sure, I got up too. I'm glad you stopped by. Me too. He kissed my cheek again. Thanks again for your help. I really appreciate it. You're welcome, I replied. You're my only son. I want you to be happy. It was the truth. Despite everything, I did want him to be happy. The other question was whether he deserved that happiness. Leighton left, and the house fell silent again. I looked at my watch, almost time to go out to meet Rowena. I grabbed my bag and car keys and left the house. The Olive Grove restaurant was in the center of Upland, a 20-minute drive from my house. It was a small, cozy place with Mediterranean cuisine and dim lighting. Rowena and I had met here often over the years. Rowena was already seated at our usual table in the corner when I arrived. We'd been friends since college, almost 45 years. She was one of the few constants in my life. Hi, she came up to give me a hug. I already ordered us some wine. Great. I sat down across from her. How was your day? The usual, Rowena shrugged. Paperwork, phone calls, boss in a bad mood, nothing new. But that's not what I want to talk about. Tell me what's going on with Leighton and his wedding. I sighed and recounted our conversation with my son today, not leaving out any details. Rowena listened without interrupting, only shaking her head at particularly outrageous moments. And you gave him another 15,000? She asked when I was done. After he bluntly said he didn't want you at his wedding? Yes. I sipped my wine. It sounds stupid when you say it like that. Not stupid, but... Rowena was silent, searching for words. Willow, don't you see what's happening? He's using you. He always has. I know, I answered quietly. You know? She raised her eyebrows in surprise. Then why do you keep giving him money? That's a good question. I've asked it to myself many times. Because it's the only way I can stay a part of his life, I said finally. If I stopped giving him money, he'd just disappear. He'll stop calling, he'll stop coming. I'll lose him completely. Rowena looked at me sadly. Darling, you've already lost him. What's left isn't a real relationship. It's a transaction. The words were painful, but true. I know I said it again. But it's hard to let go of an only child, you know? Even if he's, like that. I understand, Rowena put her hand over mine. But sooner or later, you have to do it. For your own sake. We were silent when the waiter came to take our order. After he left, Rowena spoke again. What are you going to do? About the wedding? I don't know, I answered honestly. Part of me wants to just let the situation go. The other part. Want to teach him a lesson? Rowena grinned. I'd definitely go for the second option if I were you. You've always been more decisive, I smiled. Remember when you told Professor Jenkins what you thought of his sexist remarks in college? Oh, yeah, Rowena laughed. He was shocked. No one had ever dared to contradict him before. You see, and I've always been careful. But that doesn't mean you're weak, Willow. Rowena looked me in the eye. You're one of the strongest women I know. You've built a successful career at a time when it wasn't easy for women. You raised your son alone after Erwin died. You've handled it all. And yet I can't handle my own son, I said bitterly. Because he knows your weak spot, Rowena sighed. He knows you'd do anything not to lose him. The waiter brought our entrees, and we ate in silence for a while. I pondered my friend's words. She was right, of course. Leighton had learned how to manipulate me as a teenager, and over the years, he'd only gotten better at it. You know what? I finally said it. I think I should go to that wedding. Rowena looked at me in surprise. Uninvited? Really? Yes, I nodded. I want to see Leighton's reaction, and to meet Laura's parents that he's so worried about. It might be awkward, Rowena said cautiously. Absolutely, I agreed. But I'm tired of being invisible. I paid $35,000 for this wedding. I have a right to be there. What if they kick you out? Rowena looked worried. Then I'll leave, I replied simply. But at least I'll try. Rowena stared at me for a few seconds, then nodded slowly. Good. If that's what you decide, I'll support you. Do you want me to come with you? No, I shook my head. It's something I have to do on my own. Whatever you say, Rowena raised her glass. Here's to brave decisions. To brave decisions, I smiled, clinking my glass with hers. We spent the rest of the dinner talking about more pleasant things. Books we'd recently read, plans for the summer, Rowena's new hobby, ceramics. She always had a way of distracting me from my gloomy thoughts. As we said our goodbyes at the entrance to the restaurant, Rowena hugged me tightly. Whatever you decide about the wedding, she said, remember that you deserve respect, especially from your own son. Thank you, I hugged her back. I don't know what I would have done without you. Luckily, you won't have to find out, she winked at me. I'll see you next week? I will, I nodded. On the way home, I thought about our conversation. Rowena always knew how to tell the truth, even if it was unpleasant. And today she was absolutely right. My relationship with Leighton had long ago turned into a transaction. I gave money. He pretended we were family. But what if I stopped that transaction? What if I showed him that I was no longer willing to accept those terms? I parked in front of the house and sat in the car for a while, contemplating a plan of action. The decision to go to the wedding uninvited had been impulsive, but the more I thought about it, the more it seemed right. I wanted to see my son's reaction. I wanted to meet Laura's parents and see if they were really as conservative as he described. I wanted to finally stop being a ghost in my own child's life. But what if Leighton did kick me out? What if he publicly disowned me in front of all the guests? The thought was painful, but I forced myself to consider that option as well. How would I feel? Humiliation, of course, pain, anger, perhaps. But wouldn't it be better to know the truth than to continue living in illusions? I got out of the car and headed toward the house. It was getting dark, and in the light of the street lamps, my garden looked mysterious and a little unsettling, and so did my future. Upon entering the house, the first thing I did was check my phone. One new message from Leighton. Thanks again for all your help, Mom. You're the best. I'll check in soon. I grinned. Soon, in Leighton's language, meant when I need something else. But maybe this time our next meeting would be different from the previous ones. Maybe this time I'd finally say everything I'd accumulated over the years. I looked at the calendar on the wall. June 15th was less than a month away. Time to prepare not only for my son's wedding, but also for the possible final breakup of our relationship. Strangely, the thought didn't cause the pain I expected. Instead, I felt something akin to relief. Like a heavy weight I'd been carrying for years was about to fall from my shoulders. I decided to go to bed early. Tomorrow was a big day. I had to buy an outfit for the wedding I wasn't invited to. Something elegant, but not too flashy. Something that would say, I'm not here to attract attention, but I have a right to be here. As I fell asleep, I thought about what I'd say to Leighton when I saw him in the chapel, or what I would say to Laura and her parents. But deep down, I knew that what mattered most was that I would finally tell myself to stop being invisible in my own son's life. June 15th was surprisingly sunny and warm. I woke up early before 6 o'clock, even though the ceremony wasn't until 4 in the afternoon. A strange feeling swept over me, a mixture of determination, anxiety, and an almost childlike excitement. Today was going to be different, one way or another. I spent a long time choosing what to wear to my son's wedding. In the end, I decided on a dark blue dress flats with a jacket of the same color. Elegant, restrained, without excessive flashiness. I added a string of pearls, which Irwin had given me for my 20th wedding anniversary, and low-heeled shoes. Nothing flashy or inappropriate. I didn't want to give Leighton any more reason to be unhappy. The morning and afternoon dragged painfully slow. I tried to occupy myself with the usual chores, watering the flowers in the garden, reading the newspaper, preparing a light lunch. But my thoughts kept returning to the upcoming confrontation. What would I say? How would Leighton react? And Laura and her parents? I rehearsed possible scenarios, choosing words, imagining reactions. It helped with the nervousness. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I started getting ready. I showered, styled my hair, did a little makeup. At 3 o'clock, I was fully prepared and stood in front of the mirror in the hallway, assessing my reflection. The woman looking at me from the mirror looked calm and collected. There was tension in her eyes. "You can do this," I said to my reflection. "You deserve respect." St. Thomas Chapel was on a small hill on the east side of town, about 20 minutes from my house. I decided to arrive early to assess the surroundings and left at 3 hours and 10 minutes. As I drove up to the chapel, I saw that the area around it was already decorated with white ribbons and flowers. A few cars were parked in the parking lot, apparently the organizers and early guests. I parked a little to the side and sat in the car for a while, gathering my thoughts. It was a small stone chapel, built back in the 19th century. I'd always considered it one of the most beautiful buildings in Upland. It was cool inside, even on the hottest days, and the stained glass windows created a magical play of light. A good choice for a wedding ceremony, no matter what Leighton said about Laura's conservative parents. At 3 hours and 40 minutes, I decided it was time. I grabbed my purse, checked that I had my keys and phone, and got out of the car. For a moment, I had the urge to turn around and go home, to forget this stupid idea, to avoid the inevitable humiliation. But I forced myself to go forward. No more hiding. At the entrance to the chapel stood a young man in a suit, apparently an assistant organizer. He smiled welcomingly at me. "Good afternoon. Are you a guest of the bride or groom? Here it is, the moment of truth." "I am the groom's mother," I replied calmly. The young man frowned slightly and looked at the clipboard he was holding. "Harlow," he muttered. "Strange, I don't see you on the list." "There must be some mistake." I smiled at him. "You don't think a son wouldn't invite his own mother to a wedding, do you?" He smiled back uncertainly. "Of course not. Come in, please. The seats for the groom's family are on the right side of the chapel." I nodded my thanks and went inside. The chapel was already beginning to fill with guests. I noticed several elderly couples, apparently Laura's relatives, judging by their conservative outfits. Young men in fancy suits and dresses, probably friends of Leighton and Laura. Everyone was talking softly, creating a pleasant background noise. I chose a seat at the end of the row so I could leave quickly if things got too uncomfortable. So far, no one had paid much attention to me, though a couple people nodded politely as they passed by. At 3 hours and 55 minutes, the chapel was nearly full. I looked around, trying to find Leighton or Laura, but they weren't in sight yet. The bride was probably getting ready in a separate room somewhere, and Leighton was supposed to enter from the other entrance closer to the beginning of the ceremony. Indeed, at exactly 4 o'clock, the side door opened and Leighton walked in, accompanied by a friend who was apparently his best man. My son looked impeccable in a dark suit with a white rose in his buttonhole. They stood at the altar, Leighton glancing around nervously. Our gazes met. I saw his face change, surprise, then shock, then outright horror. He whispered something to his best man and quickly made his way toward me, maneuvering between the rows. "Mom," his voice was quiet, but there was steel in it. "What are you doing here?" "I came to your wedding," I replied calmly. "I clearly said you weren't invited," Leighton spoke through his teeth, trying to keep a smile for those around him. "Go away, please. I paid $35,000 for this wedding. I replied just as quietly. I think that gives me the right to attend. It was a gift. His face contorted with anger. Gifts don't give you the right to dictate terms. Then call it an investment, I continued calmly. I want to see what I've invested my money in. Leighton looked around. Some of the guests were already starting to pay attention to our conversation. Mom, please! His voice became pleading. Laura will be hysterical if she sees you here. Her parents have already asked who you are. So introduce me to them, I suggested. Introduce me to your future in-laws. No! He almost shouted it, then lowered his voice. Eli and Mom, I'm asking you to leave. Don't ruin my day. Your day? I looked him in the eye. What about my day? The day I found out my son was so ashamed of me that he didn't want to see me at his own wedding? I'm not ashamed. He looked away. It's just that it'll be, easier for everyone. For everyone or for you? Leighton didn't answer. Instead, he took a step back and straightened, his face frozen. Mom, you weren't invited. Go away, he said loud and clear. Several heads turned in our direction. I felt the color flood my face. Not from shame, not from anger and pain. My own son had publicly disowned me. Okay, I stood up. I'll leave. Without another word, I headed for the exit. I could feel the stares, hear the whispers, but I didn't turn around. Keeping my dignity, I walked out of the chapel into the bright June sun. Only when I was in the car did I let myself exhale. My hands trembled slightly as I pulled out my keys. Strangely, I didn't feel the urge to cry. Just a huge, all-consuming emptiness inside. And determination. I started the car and pulled out of the parking lot. I needed to find a quiet place to make some calls. About a kilometer from the chapel, I spotted a small park and stopped there. Sitting on a bench under a spreading oak tree, I pulled out my phone and opened the banking app. First, I checked the status of the payments I'd made for Leighton's wedding. Most of them had been made through his account, but some had gone directly to service providers, the caterer, the florists, the photographer. These payments could still be canceled because they were set up as prepayments with final payment after the event. Without thinking any further, I dialed the bank's number. After a few beeps, a polite female voice answered. Hello, First National Bank. How can I help you? Hello? My name is Willow Harlow, I said. I would like to cancel a few payments that haven't been finalized yet. Of course, Mrs. Harlow. I'll need to verify your identity. Can you give me the last 4 digits of your social security number and your date of birth? I provided the necessary information and the operator confirmed my identity. What specific payments would you like to cancel? I began listing Grand Plaza Restaurant, Bloom Florist, Moment Photo Studio, and Event Pro, an equipment rental company. The operator patiently recorded everything. Okay, Mrs. Harlow, I see these payments in your history. They're set up as prepayments with the option to cancel before services are rendered. May I ask the reason for the cancellation? Personal circumstances, I answered briefly. I see. In that case, we can initiate the cancellation right away. The funds will be returned to your account within 3 to 5 business days. There is a possibility that the service providers may deduct a cancellation fee as per their terms and conditions. That's not a problem, I said. Please cancel all payments listed. Okay, I'll proceed to cancel. It will take a few minutes. While the operator worked, I looked at the green foliage overhead. A strange calmness swept over me. I was doing what I should have done long ago, setting boundaries. Mrs. Harlow, I have canceled all the payments indicated, the operator informed me after a few minutes. You will be sent a confirmation email. Is there anything else I can do for you? No, thank you, I replied. You've been very helpful. After speaking with the bank, I called the Grand Plaza restaurant directly to make sure they had received the cancellation notice. The manager confirmed that the reservation for tonight would be canceled unless an alternative payment was received. I then called the florist and photo studio with the same question. All of them confirmed the services would be canceled if no new payment was received. After finishing the calls, I took a deep breath. The deed was done. Now I had to wait for a response. I didn't have to wait long. About an hour later, when I had already returned home and changed into home clothes, my phone rang. Laura's name popped up on the screen. I answered after the third ringtone. Hello? Mrs. Harlow! Laura's voice sounded panicked. What's going on? We just got a call from the restaurant saying our reservation was canceled for non-payment. And so did the photographer. What happened to the money? She spoke quickly, gasping with excitement. In the background, I could hear other people's voices, someone crying. I canceled the payments, I replied calmly. What? Her voice trailed off. Why? Leighton said you gave us that money as a gift. It wasn't a gift, Laura, I said. It was an investment in the family relationship. But today, Leighton made it clear that I am not part of his family. He publicly disowned me. But the ceremony's already started. There was desperation in her voice. The guests are waiting. We have to be at the restaurant in an hour. What do we do now? You could pay for it yourself, I suggested. Or cancel the banquet. We don't have that kind of money, Laura exclaimed. We can't just find $30,000 for an hour. I understand, I paused. No wedding without me. There was silence. I could almost see Laura trying to comprehend the situation. Are you blackmailing us? She finally asked in a shocked voice. No, Laura, I said softly but firmly. I'm just showing you reality. You and Leighton wanted to have the wedding without me, but with my money. That's not how it works. But Leighton said you didn't want to come. She suddenly blurted out. That you were too busy and not interested in our lives. That's it. Another one of my son's lies. He lied, I said simply. I never said I didn't want to come to his wedding. On the contrary, I asked for an invitation, and today I came to support him on his big day, and he asked me to leave. Silence again. Then I heard muffled voices. Apparently, Laura was discussing the situation with someone nearby. Mrs. Harlow, her voice was more subdued now. Is there anything we can do to solve this problem? Please. All our friends and family are here. This is so humiliating. I know what it's like to be humiliated, Laura, I replied. I experienced it today when my son publicly rejected me. Yeah, I didn't know. She seemed genuinely shocked. Leighton never told me you two were in such a relationship. I'm sure he didn't, I sighed. He prefers to sugarcoat reality. There was a murmur of voices in the background again. It sounded like someone was trying to take Laura's cell phone. Mrs. Harlow, she finally spoke again, her voice sounding pleading. What do we need to do to get your money back? Please tell me, I wondered. What did I really want? Not to humiliate my son and his fiancée exactly. Not to ruin their day out of revenge. I just wanted respect. Recognition. Something I hadn't been given in years. I want Leighton to apologize in person, I finally said. Not over the phone. I want him to come to my house and talk to me face to face. Then I'll reinstate the payments. He can't leave the wedding now? Laura sounded indignant. Of course he can, I argued calmly. Especially if he wants the wedding to go on. But it will take at least an hour for him to get to you and back. What should we tell the guests? The truth, I suggested. Or any lie you prefer. The choice is yours. Laura was dumbfounded. I could almost hear the gears turning in her head as she tried to find a way out. Yeah, I'll tell him, she finally said. But it's a lesson, Laura. I finished softly for her. A lesson Leighton should have learned a long time ago. Actions have consequences. Okay, she seemed to give up. I'll tell him. I'll be waiting, I replied and ended the call. Placing the phone on the table, I sank into the chair and closed my eyes. The adrenaline that had sustained me for the past few hours began to subside, leaving me tired and strangely empty. I felt neither triumph nor satisfaction from my actions. Only sadness that it had come to this at all, that I had to resort to such measures just to get my own son to talk to me. But I didn't regret my decision. For the first time in years, I wasn't acting out of fear of losing Leighton, but out of respect for myself. And that, oddly enough, gave me a sense of freedom. Now I just had to wait to see if he came. If he did, maybe we still had a chance at a relationship. If not, well, at least I'd know where I stood in his life. Either way, today changed everything. Exactly 42 minutes after my conversation with Laura, I heard the sound of a car pulling up. I looked out the window and saw Leighton's silver Audi parked in front of my house. My son got out of the car, slamming the door loudly. Even from this distance, I could tell he was furious. Still in his wedding suit, but without his jacket, His shirt collar undone and his tie bunched up, he headed for the front door. I took a deep breath, preparing myself for the conversation to come, and went to open it. No sooner had I reached the hallway than I heard a loud knock. "Open up!" Leighton shouted from the other side of the door. "I know you're home!" I slowly turned the key and opened the door. Leighton literally burst inside, his face contorted with anger. "Are you crazy?" He didn't say hello, he went on the offensive. "What are you doing?" "Hello, Leighton," I replied calmly. "Come on in. Don't do that." He waved his hand in the air. "Don't act like everything's fine. You ruined my wedding." "All I did was cancel payments for services I'd paid for," I countered, closing the front door. "It's my money, and I have the right to use it as I see fit." "You promised!" He was almost shouting. "You gave your word you'd pay for the wedding." "Provided it was a family affair." I looked him straight in the eye. "But you made it clear that I'm not part of your family." "I just asked you to leave the ceremony." Leighton ran his hand through his hair in frustration. "That doesn't mean I'm abandoning you as a mother." "You kicked me out publicly," I reminded him. "You said in front of all the guests that I wasn't invited. What was that if not rejection?" Leighton opened his mouth to object, but then closed it. He knew I was right. "Okay," he finally said, trying to pull himself together. "I overreacted. I'm sorry. But right now, 50 people are waiting in the chapel, not knowing what to do next. Laura's in tears. Her parents are in shock. Can we resolve this?" "We're already solving it," I replied. "You're here. We're talking. That's progress." "Mom, please!" He clenched his fists. "I apologized." "What more do you want?" "The truth," I said simply. "I want you to be honest with me for once, and with yourself." Leighton gave me a piercing look, then his shoulders slumped. "Okay," he sighed. "Let's talk. But can I call Laura first? Tell her I'll be late." "Sure," I nodded. He pulled out his cell phone and stepped back to the window. I heard bits and pieces of the conversation. "Yeah, I'm at her place. No, haven't decided yet. I'll try to hurry up. Tell them something. Make up a reason." After the call, he turned to me. "Can we sit down?" he asked in a calmer tone. We walked into the living room and sat in the chairs across from each other. Leighton looked tired and lost, not as confident as usual. "So," he began, "you want the truth. What kind of truth?" "Why didn't you want me at your wedding?" I asked directly. "The real reason." Leighton looked away, scrutinizing his hands. "Because," he hesitated, "because Laura doesn't know that I've been financially supporting you all these years?" I finished for him. "Yes," he exhaled. "She thinks I'm completely on my own. That I've earned the car, the apartment, the vacations, everything. And you were afraid I'd say something?" "Not that I was afraid." He wrinkled his nose. "It would have been embarrassing." "Awkward," I repeated. "Isn't lying to your fiancé embarrassing?" "I didn't lie." He threw his head up. "I just didn't tell everything." "That's lying, Leighton," I corrected him gently. "Silence is also a form of lying, especially in matters this important." He didn't answer, lowering his gaze again. "What did you tell Laura about me?" I asked after a pause. "That you're a successful tax consultant," he answered reluctantly. "That you've always been career-focused and we've never been particularly close." "And she wasn't surprised that the groom's mother wasn't invited to the wedding?" "I said that you refused to come yourself." His voice became almost a whisper. "That you weren't interested." I shook my head, feeling the bitterness growing inside. "And she believed it?" "Yes," Leighton shrugged. "Why not? A lot of parents today aren't involved in their kids' lives." "And about the money?" I continued. "How did you explain your financial situation?" I told him I was making good money. He was getting quieter. That I'd made a good investment a few years ago. Our conversation was interrupted by the sound of a car pulling up. I looked out the window and saw a cab from which Laura got out, still in her wedding dress, though without her veil. "Laura's here," I informed Leighton. He jumped up, clearly nervous, and hurried to open the door. "Laura, honey," I heard his voice from the hallway. "I was just about to—" "Not now, Leighton." Laura's voice was determined. "We need to have a serious talk." They walked into the living room. Laura nodded at me. "Mrs. Harlow?" "Hello, Laura," I nodded back. "Have a seat, please." She sat down on the couch, straightening the folds of her lush dress. Leighton settled down next to her uncertainly. So, Laura began, looking at both of us intently, will someone please explain to me what's going on here? It's just a misunderstanding, Leighton said quickly. We've already solved it. We can go back to the chapel. A misunderstanding? Laura turned to him, her eyes narrowed. 50 guests have been waiting for over an hour. All payments have been canceled. My mother is on the verge of a nervous breakdown, and you call that a misunderstanding? Yeah. Leighton stammered. Mrs. Harlow, Laura turned to me. Why did you cancel the payments? Because Leighton publicly kicked me out of the chapel, saying I wasn't invited to a wedding I'd paid for in full. I answered bluntly. Laura blinked in surprise, then turned to Leighton. You didn't invite your mother to our wedding? I explained to you. He started to justify himself. Mom was always so busy, she didn't want to. That's not true, I interrupted. I never said I didn't want to come. On the contrary, I asked for an invitation. Laura looked at Leighton shocked. You lied to me? Leighton lowered his head, clearly not knowing what to say. And one more thing, I continued, seeing that my son was silent. Leighton didn't seem to have told you that I've been supporting him financially all these years. His car, his apartment, his lifestyle all paid for by me. Laura turned pale. Her eyes widened. What? She said in a barely audible voice. Mom's exaggerating, Leighton quickly interjected. She's helped me out sometimes, but I'm making $35,000 for the wedding, I interrupted. New car 3 years ago. Down payment on an apartment. Monthly help with the bills. Those are just a few examples. Laura turned slowly toward Leighton, her face a mixture of shock and disgust. You've been lying to me this whole time? Her voice trembled. About your financial situation? About your mother? What else have you lied about, Leighton? I haven't lied. He defended himself. I just didn't tell the whole truth. It's not the same thing. No, Leighton, it's the same thing. Laura shook her head. You've given me the wrong idea about myself, about our future. What does it matter where the money comes from? He was indignant. The main thing is that we have it. The difference is enormous, Laura exclaimed. I thought I was marrying an independent, successful man, but it turned out to be... She didn't finish her sentence, but the meaning was clear. And it turned out that I wasn't good enough for you? Leighton asked bitterly. Now that you know I'm not as rich as you thought? It's not about money. Laura shook her head. It's about honesty. It's about trust. You've been lying to me since the beginning of our relationship. Leighton was silent, unable to find anything to say. And how could you do that to your mother? Laura continued, her voice shaking with indignation. She's paying for your life, your wedding, and you didn't even invite her. You don't understand, Leighton muttered. We have a complicated relationship. Yes, it is, Laura nodded. So complicated that you take money from her, but you're so ashamed of her that you don't want her at your wedding. She stood up, straightening her dress. I can't marry you, Leighton, she said firmly. Not after all this. What? He jumped to his feet. Laura, you can't. I can. She took a step back. And I've decided. There will be no wedding. But there will be guests, the restaurant. Leighton looked at her confused. It's all paid for. Tell them the truth, Laura suggested. Or lie like you used to. I don't care. I'm going back to the chapel to tell my parents. Laura, please. Leighton grabbed her arm. Let's talk. We can fix this. No, Leighton. She pulled her hand free. Some things can't be fixed. Trust is one of them. She turned to me. Mrs. Harlow. Her voice softened. I apologize for all of this. I'm sorry Leighton put you in this position. You have nothing to apologize for, Laura. I smiled softly. You didn't know? I do now, she nodded. And I'm grateful for that, even though it hurts. She headed for the door. Leighton followed her, continuing to coax her. Laura, please think about it. We can talk this out. Goodbye, Leighton. She opened the door. I'll send someone to get my things from your apartment. With those words, she walked out. Leighton and I heard her get into a cab and drive away. Leighton slowly closed the door and turned to me. His face was contorted with anger. Satisfied, he hissed. You ruined my wedding, my life. No, Leighton. I shook my head. I didn't ruin your wedding. The truth did. The truth you were hiding. You set this whole thing up on purpose, he raised his voice. Canceled the payments, made me bring Laura here, told her everything. I didn't make you lie to her all those months, I said calmly. It was your choice. What do you care what I told her? He clenched his fists. It was our relationship, not yours. A relationship built on lies, Leighton, I said. It wouldn't have lasted anyway. None of your business, he was almost shouting. You had no right to interfere. And you had no right to use me as an ATM machine, hiding me from my fiancé, I replied firmly. We were both doing what we thought was right. Leighton looked at me with hatred. You ruined everything, he hissed. Everything. Now I'm going to have to explain to 50 people why the wedding isn't happening. What am I going to tell them? The truth, I suggested. For once in my life. He choked with anger. You have no idea what you've done. I loved her. I wanted to marry her. If you really loved her, I said softly, you wouldn't have lied to her in the first place. Leighton sank down on the couch and covered his face with his hands. What am I supposed to do now? His voice sounded muffled. Where do I go? It's your decision, I answered. I can't tell you how to live your life. That's a convenient position, he grinned bitterly. Ruin someone else's life and wash your hands of it. I didn't ruin your life, Leighton, I repeated patiently. I just stopped indulging your lies. There's a difference. He looked up at me, his eyes full of resentment and anger. Don't expect me to ever forgive you for that, he said. I don't, I answered honestly. But I hope that one day you'll understand. Leighton stood up, staggering like a drunk. I'm leaving, he said. I need to inform the guests, something to think of. You can stay here if you want, I suggested. Stay the night, take it easy. No, he shook his head sharply. I'm not staying in this house, not after what you did. I didn't argue. I just nodded and walked him to the door. Leighton, I called out to him when he was already standing in the doorway. I'm still your mother. I always will be, no matter what happens. He didn't answer. He just walked out, slamming the door, and a minute later I heard the sound of a car driving away. I went back to the living room and sat down in the chair, feeling a strange emptiness inside. Not the joy of revenge, not the satisfaction of justice being served. Just a quiet, calm realization that this chapter of my life was over, and that maybe it was best for everyone. I picked up my phone and called Rowena. Hi, I said when she answered. Are you busy? For you, never, she answered. What's up? How's the wedding? There won't be a wedding, I sighed. Laura broke off the engagement. What? Rowena exclaimed. Why? What happened? I briefly recounted the day's events. My visit to the chapel, the canceled payments, my conversation with Laura, and the final scene with Leighton. Oh my God. Rowena exhaled when I was done. Are you okay? Strangely, yes, I answered honestly. I feel relieved, like a weight has been lifted from my shoulders. That's understandable, Rowena said. You've finally stopped pretending. You stopped letting him use you. Yes, I nodded, though she couldn't see it. That's right. And now what? Rowena asked after a pause. Do you think Leighton will come back? I don't know, I answered honestly. He's too angry to think rationally right now. Maybe in time. Don't count on it, Rowena cautioned. It's hard for people like Leighton to admit their mistakes. It's easier to blame everyone else. I know, I sighed. But he's my son, Rowena. The only one. Part of me still hopes. I understand, she said softly. Look, I can come to you. You shouldn't be alone right now. Thanks, but I'm fine, I assured her. I just need a little time to process things. Whatever you say, Rowena didn't insist. But if you change your mind, call me anytime. I will, I smiled. Thank you for being here. We said goodbye and I put the phone down. It was starting to get dark outside the window. The day had been long and emotionally exhausting. I felt tired, but in a strange way I also felt a kind of release. For the first time in years, I was not acting out of fear of losing my son, but out of respect for myself. Though the outcome was painful for everyone involved, I couldn't bring myself to regret my decision. Leighton had to face the truth sooner or later. And Laura deserved to know who she was going to marry. I was just hastening the inevitable. I went up to the second floor to my bedroom and began to change into my house clothes. Looking at my reflection in the mirror, I saw a woman who had finally stopped sacrificing her own dignity for the phantom hope of her son's love. Perhaps this was the end of my relationship with Leighton, or perhaps the beginning of a new one, a more honest, healthier one. Time will tell, but either way, I will no longer live a lie. 3 weeks had passed since the failed wedding. Life was slowly falling into a new direction. I hadn't heard a word from Leighton, not a call, not a text. Admittedly, I hadn't expected a quick reconciliation after what had happened. Wounds that deep don't heal in a matter of days. It was a particularly warm July morning. I was sitting on the veranda with a cup of coffee, watching the sunlight play in the leaves of the garden, when the phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. "Hello?" I answered, preparing to hear another telemarketer. "Mrs. Harlow?" The voice was female, vaguely familiar. It was Laura Eccles. I straightened up in surprise. Leighton's ex-fiancé was the last person I expected to call. "Hello, Laura," I said after a moment's pause. "I wasn't expecting to hear from you." "I understand." I could hear the uncertainty in her voice. "I hope I'm not distracting you from something important?" "No, not at all," I assured her. "What can I do for you?" "I wanted to thank you," she said, and I could feel the sincerity in her words, "for opening my eyes to the Leighton situation. It was, painful, but necessary." "You're welcome," I replied. "I didn't want to hurt you, but I thought you deserved to know the truth." "And I'm grateful for that," Laura paused. "You probably already know this, but I gave Leighton back the ring and all the gifts. We're no longer in contact." "I understand," I said. "How are you doing now?" "Better than you'd expect," she said, a more confident tone in her voice. "The first week was awful explaining to my relatives, returning the gifts, all that talking. But now I realize I've avoided much worse. A marriage built on lies wouldn't have been happy." "You're right," I agreed softly. "Sometimes the most painful decisions are the right ones." "Exactly," Laura said quietly. "I also wanted to say, I admire your strength, the way you acted. A lot of people would have just kept paying to keep up the appearance of a relationship with their son." Her words touched me. There was an understanding I didn't expect from someone who'd been hurt by my actions. "Thank you, Laura. It wasn't an easy decision, I guess," she said. "Anyway, I won't take up any more of your time. I just wanted to say thank you and wish you well." "And the same to you, Laura," I replied sincerely. "You deserve to be happy." After that conversation, I sat on the veranda for a long time thinking. Laura's call had been unexpected, but it had somehow confirmed that I had done the right thing. At least one person had been helped by my actions to avoid making a mistake. By mid-July, I began to seriously consider a life change. The house seemed too big for one person, too filled with memories, both good and bad. Maybe it was time to move on. A fresh start in a new place. I was just looking at real estate listings in neighboring towns when the doorbell rang. When I opened it, it was Leighton standing in front of me. He looked gaunt, with dark circles under his eyes. He was dressed sloppily, a wrinkled shirt, jeans that had clearly seen better days. Not at all the neat, well-groomed man he tried to appear to be. "Hi, Mom," he said quietly. "Can I come in?" I stepped back silently, letting him into the house. We walked into the living room, and he sank heavily onto the couch. "How are you?" I asked, sitting down across from him. "I've been better." He tried to smile, but it was crooked. Laura was gone. Not at all. She gave me the ring back, took my stuff. Won't even talk to me. "I know," I said. "She called me." "She did?" He looked up at me in surprise. "What did she say?" "That she was grateful to know the truth." I didn't soften. "That she felt she'd avoided an unhappy marriage." Leighton flinched as if struck by a blow, but he didn't say anything. "Why are you here, Leighton?" I asked him bluntly. He took a deep breath, gathering his thoughts. I'm in trouble, Mom," he finally admitted. "Financially. After the wedding was canceled, a lot of payments had to be made anyway, penalties, settlements. I've used up all my savings, and now there's cutbacks at work. I've had my hours cut." I listened, keeping a neutral expression on my face. Part of me had been expecting this visit all along. "And you're here for the money," I finished for him. "Not exactly," he wrinkled his nose. "I came to apologize For the way I acted, for the wedding, for everything. I was wrong. The words sounded right, but I couldn't see any sincerity in his eyes. Only calculation. I knew that look all too well. And after you apologized, you were going to ask for financial help. It wasn't a question. It was a statement. Leighton lowered his head. I'm really struggling right now, he muttered. I could lose my apartment, my car, everything. I understand, I nodded. It's a tough situation. So you'll help? There was hope in his voice. Just a little bit to get back on your feet? I'll pay you back, I promise. As soon as things get better. I looked at my son carefully, 38 years old, financially dependent on his mother his entire adult life, always promising to pay me back, always assuring me this is the last time, and always coming back for more. No, Leighton, I said calmly. I'm not giving you any more money. His face widened in surprise. What? But why? You've always helped. That's why, I explained. I'd always helped, and what did that lead to? The fact that at 38, you still can't stand on your own 2 feet. I didn't do you any favors with all those years of financial support. I've kept you from growing up. But now is different, he objected, raising his voice. I'm in a crisis. I can stay on the street. You have a job, I reminded him. Maybe you'll have to move to a smaller apartment. Maybe sell your car and buy something cheaper. It's called living within your means, Leighton. Millions of people do it every day. You're seriously not going to help me? He looked at me with disbelief. After all these years? It's because of all these years, I corrected him gently. I think it's time for you to learn to live on your own. Leighton jumped to his feet, his face contorted with anger. Fine, he shouted. Now I see what's really important to you. Not me, not your son, but some kind of a lesson. You're willing to watch me lose everything just to teach me a lesson. I'm willing to watch you finally take responsibility for your life, I replied calmly. That's not cruelty, Leighton. It's love. Love? He laughed bitterly. Call it whatever you want. But remember this moment, Mom. Remember that you turned down your only son when he came to you for help. I am helping you, I said, just not in the way you expect. To hell with helping me. He headed for the door. And to hell with you. I can handle myself. You always have. I didn't bother to remind him how inaccurate that last statement was. I just gave him a silent stare. He didn't even slam the door this time, just closed it quietly behind him. I went back into the living room and sat down in the chair. Strangely, I felt no bitterness or regret, only the certainty that I had done the right thing. For the first time in years, I was acting like a real mother, not an ATM. The next day, I called the realtor and firmly decided to sell the house. It was time to move on. The next 2 weeks flew by in a flurry of activity. The realtor was an energetic young man who quickly organized a home appraisal, a photo shoot for the listing, and the first viewings. In the meantime, I started to sort through my belongings, deciding what to take with me into my new life and what to leave behind. It's amazing how much unnecessary stuff accumulates over the years. Old documents, long out-of-fashion clothes, souvenirs from forgotten trips, books that no one will open. I methodically sorted through it all, creating stacks of take, sell, give away, and throw away. The process was surprisingly therapeutic. With each item I let go of, it was as if I was freeing myself from a part of the past. Leighton's stuff was especially difficult. In the far room that had once been his bedroom, there were still boxes of his childhood drawings, his school notebooks, his first toys. I paged through them, remembering the little boy with the bright smile and open heart. Where and when did we take a wrong turn? At what point did I start replacing love with money? Maybe after Erwin died. Maybe even before that. It didn't matter now. I carefully put the baby things in a separate box, in case Leighton ever wanted them, and took them up to the attic. A month after the sale started, the first serious buyer showed up. A middle-aged couple with 2 teenage children. They were looking for a spacious house in a good neighborhood, and mine was a perfect fit. After 2 viewings and brief negotiations, we hit the ground running. Now I had to decide where to move next. I've always loved the coast, and the thought of spending mornings looking at the ocean seemed appealing. After a few virtual tours, I found a cozy little house in a seaside town 300 kilometers from Upland. Not too far to visit Rowena, but far enough to make a fresh start. On one of the last days before the move, I took Rowena out to dinner. We sat on the veranda enjoying the warm August evening and a bottle of good wine. "I can't believe you're really leaving," Rowena said, shaking her glass in her hand. "After all these years." "I have a hard time believing it myself sometimes," I admitted. "But the more I think about it, the more it seems right." "What about Leighton?" she asked cautiously. "Did you tell him?" "I left a message." I shrugged. "He didn't call me back." "That's it?" Rowena raised an eyebrow. "After all these years? What else could I do?" I sighed. "He's a grown man, Rowena. I can't force him to maintain a relationship with me if he doesn't want to." "I know," she nodded. "It just seems sad, that kind of ending." "It's not necessarily an ending," I smiled. "Maybe someday when the pain subsides, we can build a new, healthier relationship, without the financial dependency, without manipulation." "I hope so," Rowena said sincerely, "for the sake of both of you." We were silent for a moment, watching the sun slowly sink below the horizon, coloring the sky in shades of pink and gold. "What about you?" I asked. "Will you miss me?" "Madly," Rowena smiled. "But I've already planned a visit to your new home for Thanksgiving. And we'll call each other every week, won't we?" "Of course." I squeezed her hand. "Our friendship will survive any distance." "And now," Rowena raised her glass, "I'd like to propose a toast to a new chapter in Willow Harlow's life, to the courage to start anew, to freedom." "To freedom," I echoed, and we clinked glasses. The day of the move, I woke up at first light. Almost everything was already packed and loaded into the van, which would arrive in 2 hours. All that was left was to gather the last little things and say goodbye to the house that had been my refuge for almost 30 years. I slowly walked around the empty rooms, each holding a different memory. The bedroom where Erwin and I fell asleep and woke up side by side. The nursery where I rocked little Leighton in my arms. The kitchen where we gathered for family dinners. The living room where we celebrated birthdays and Christmas. So much life was lived within these walls. So much joy and sorrow, love and loss. But a house is more than just the walls. It's the people who live in it. And people change, move on. And now it was my time to move on. When I stepped out onto the porch for the last time, holding a small bag of essentials, I felt not sadness, but a strange relief. It was as if the heavy weight I had been carrying all these years had finally fallen from my shoulders. I got into the car and took one last look at the house. Here I had been a wife, a mother, a widow. Here I had tried to buy my son's love with money. Here I finally found the strength to say no and start living for myself. "Goodbye," I whispered, starting the engine. The drive to my new home took about 4 hours. I drove without hurry, enjoying the views and the feeling of freedom. The radio played old songs, reminding me of my youth, when everything seemed possible. Maybe now, at 67, I was beginning to believe it again. My new home was even lovelier than it looked in the pictures. A small but cozy cottage overlooking the ocean, white walls, blue shutters, red tile roof, a small garden that was already waiting for my caring hands, and most importantly, a wide terrace overlooking the sea. I got out of the car and took a deep breath of salty sea air. The sound of the waves, the cries of the seagulls, the light breeze playing with my hair. All this created a feeling of a new beginning. The van with my things wasn't due to arrive for another hour, so I had time to just stand on the beach and savor the moment. I kicked off my shoes and walked barefoot on the warm sand, feeling it seep between my toes, the kind of simple pleasure I hadn't allowed myself in. How long? How long? 10 years? 20? The waves lapped lazily against the shore, leaving foamy trails. The silhouettes of fishing boats could be seen in the distance. Seagulls circled overhead, their cries blending with the sound of the surf into a bizarre melody. I sat on the sand with my arms around my knees and just stared into the distance, at the horizon line where the blue sky met the blue sea. At that moment, I felt a strange, almost forgotten sensation, a calmness. Not the forced calm I'd been displaying all these years, hiding my pain and frustration, but a real, deep inner peace, acceptance of what was and openness to what would be. I didn't know if I would ever see Leighton again, whether our wounds would ever heal enough for us to be a family again. But for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel that question as a weight on my heart. No matter what happened, I would be okay. I'd learned to let go. The phone rang, interrupting my musings. The van driver was calling. They would be arriving earlier than planned. I rose to my feet, shook the sand off my clothes, and headed for the house. It was time to set up my new nest. It was time to start my new life. A life where I would no longer sacrifice my own dignity for the illusion of a relationship. A life where I would finally be free from the toxic family bonds that had held me captive for far too long. I looked back at the ocean one more time before entering the house. The waves continued to lapping at the shore, as they had done for millions of years before me, and would do for millions of years after. There was a strange wisdom in their perpetual motion. They didn't cling to the shore, they didn't cling to the rocks, they just came and went, in the endless dance that was life itself. Maybe that was the central truth I finally realized in my 67 years. You have to know how to let go, and then freedom comes.